Imagine waking up every day deep in a jungle, your uniform torn, your comrades gone, yet you still believe the war rages on. For nearly 30 years, one man fought an enemy that no longer existed. This is the story of Hiroo Onoda, the soldier who refused to surrender, long after the world had moved on. It was 1944, the dying days of World War II in the Pacific. Hiroo Onoda was young, barely in his 20s, when he stepped off a supply boat onto the humid shores of Lubang Island in the Philippines. He was an intelligence officer, trained, disciplined, devoted. His orders were absolute: hold your position, never surrender, never take your own life. Around him, the war raged. The empire was crumbling, though he couldn't have known it then. All he knew was duty. Within months, the atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrendered. The war ended. Leaflets rained down from Allied planes over Lubang Island, proclaiming peace, urging soldiers to come out of hiding. Onoda read them and dismissed them. Propaganda, he thought. A trick to draw us out. When the war ended for the world, for Onoda, it had only just begun. He wasn't alone at first. 3 other soldiers remained with him, hiding, waiting, believing. They moved through the jungle like ghosts, unseen, unheard. They lived off stolen rice, wild bananas, slaughtered cattle. They built shelters from palm leaves and kept their rifles clean with rainwater and rags. Every sound was scrutinized. Every distant plane could be reinforcements. Every radio transmission might carry the coded signal they waited for. But it never came. One by one, his companions fell away. One was shot by local police in 1954. Another surrendered in 1950, unable to bear the isolation any longer. The third was killed in a firefight in 1972. Onoda remained. Decades passed. The world beyond the jungle transformed. The 1950s became the 1960s, then the 1970s. Man landed on the moon. Rock and roll filled the airwaves. Tokyo rebuilt itself into a gleaming metropolis of neon and steel. And in the green shadows of Lubang Island, a soldier still polished his rifle, still kept watch, still believed. Each sunrise meant one more day to fulfill his orders. Each night, he whispered a silent promise to a nation that no longer existed. The locals began to call him a ghost. Children told stories of the phantom soldier who haunted the jungle. Search parties were sent. Family members pleaded over loudspeakers. Photographs of loved ones were left at the forest's edge. He saw them all, and trusted none of it. By the late 1960s, most believed he was dead. But Hiroo Onoda was very much alive, living in a war that existed only in his mind, fighting an enemy made of memory and devotion. Rain fell like static over forgotten dreams. The jungle breathed around him, ancient and indifferent. Time moved forward everywhere but here. Then, in February 1974, something impossible happened. A young Japanese adventurer named Norio Suzuki arrived on Lubang Island. He was eccentric, fearless, searching for 3 things: Lieutenant Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman, in that order. Against all odds, he found him. Suzuki approached carefully, hands raised, speaking Japanese. Onoda emerged from the shadows, rifle ready, eyes sharp with decades of vigilance. They talked, for hours. Suzuki told him the war was over. Japan had surrendered 29 years ago. The emperor himself had announced it. Onoda listened and refused to believe. "I will only surrender," he said, "when my commanding officer gives me the order." Suzuki returned to Japan with the news. Remarkably, Onoda's former superior officer was still alive, now a quiet bookseller living an ordinary life. The Japanese government located him, explained the situation, and asked him to return to Lubang. He agreed. On March 9, 1974, the old commander stood in full uniform on that Philippine island. Before him stood Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, thin, weathered, still at attention after 3 decades. The commander read the order: "You are relieved of duty. The war is over. Return home." After 29 years, Onoda finally laid down his weapon. He bowed, he handed over his sword, his rifle still in working condition, 500 rounds of ammunition, and several hand grenades. And he apologized for the decades of resistance, for the locals killed in confusion, for being the last soldier of a war that had ended before he could accept it. The war, for him, was over. The jungle fell silent, and so did the life he had known. Hiroo Onoda returned to Japan a stranger in his own land. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Crowds gathered to see the man who had become a legend. But behind his disciplined posture, there was bewilderment. Tokyo was unrecognizable, a sprawling city of highways and skyscrapers where once there had been rubble and ash. "I was faithful to my orders," he said quietly in interviews, "and that's all I knew." Some called him a hero, a symbol of unwavering loyalty and samurai spirit. Others saw something darker, the cost of blind obedience, the danger of devotion untempered by reason. Onoda himself struggled to adapt. The world had moved at the speed of decades. He had moved at the speed of survival. He felt out of place, out of time. Eventually, he left Japan again, this time for Brazil, where he bought a cattle ranch and lived simply, far from the noise. But even there, the questions followed him. What did it mean to believe so completely? What was lost in those 30 years? Years later, he returned to Japan and the Philippines. He spoke to young people about survival, about perseverance, about the strength of conviction. But perhaps, unknowingly, he also taught them about the limits of belief, about the danger of fighting wars that exist only in the mind. Onoda's story is not about madness or stubbornness. It's about devotion to an idea, to a country, to a promise that time itself had forgotten. He lived until 2014, reaching the age of 91. By then, the world had changed again, many times over. But in some quiet corner of his mind, perhaps a part of him never left that jungle, never stopped keeping watch, never stopped waiting for orders that would finally let him rest. He lived 30 years in a war that had ended, yet his story still asks us, what wars do we keep fighting long after they're over?